Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for watching. My name is Michelle Valiukenas. I'm the Executive Director of the Colette Louise Tisdall Foundation. And our mission is to improve outcomes of pregnancy, childbirth, prematurity, and infancy, as well as aid in the grieving process through financial assistance, education, and advocacy. Our financial assistance piece is probably what we're most known for. We help families across the nation who are in financial crisis because of a high risk or complicated pregnancy, a NICU stay, or a loss. And as part of our education piece, we have been hosting these platforms and allowing experts to come and sit in conversation with us about a topic and sharing that with all of you. And so today I'm so thrilled to have an amazing friend and supporter of the organization and just a real asset to the perinatal community, and that's Jill Kottmeier. And she is the Bereavement Support Specialist. Now I just got her title wrong, or I hope not. Okay. At Northwest Community Hospital in Arlington Heights, Illinois. And so I am going to allow Jill to introduce herself a little bit more fully, maybe give her correct title, and to kind of talk about this. We're talking about children and grief today. So thanks, Jill, so much for having us.
Thank you, Michelle. And it's funny because my title has evolved so much over the years. So I'll go by anything you wanna call me at this point. But like Michelle said, my name is Jill Kottmeier, and I work at Northwest Community Hospital. And currently my title is Perinatal Palliative Care Coordinator. So I support our families who have a very sick baby, a baby that's possibly dying, or a baby that's already passed, and mom is in labor giving birth. I also cover our pediatric emergency department for any deaths that occur there. Thankfully, that is limited, but they do need additional support down there. And within that, that area of service and the needs that I fill for patients, it's very, very common that there's siblings involved. So that is where I've learned most of my information that I've learned is from families and also from outside education on children and grief and what's important in supporting our smallest and tiniest of grievers.
I muted myself and I forgot I did. So, you're talking largely, we're saying grief, we're saying death, and typically death of a sibling. And what are some of the things, obviously, I think anyone can imagine that, a child loss, a baby loss is so different than some of the, losses we expect in life, right? But how is it different for children who are experiencing that?
Yeah, so for children, they process grief completely differently than adults do, and it looks different and it feels different, and sometimes it looks like they're not grieving when they really are. And one of my favorite quotes that I live by is, if you're old enough to love, you're old enough to grieve. Mm-hmm. And any child, no matter their age, has a bond with their sibling, even if it's a sibling that's coming. We include children in every aspect of pregnancy and planning. And now it's so popular to have these gender reveals, and children are involved at every step of the way. But then when it comes to a death that is obviously very unexpected, nobody's ever planning for that. As parents and caregivers, sometimes we want to shield them, to quote unquote protect them. And I think that's every parent's initial instinct is, oh gosh, I have to protect my child against this. And there's nothing wrong with that instinct. But when we can sit down and have conversation about children's needs when there's a death, there's a better understanding of, okay, maybe we do need to include them in this because they're part of this relationship, and we need to honor that sibling relationship that they have. Mm-hmm. And that means including them in the death.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I can attest to personally that sibling bond. We have our little guy Elliot, who is almost a year old, and he has an older sister who died before he was born. And it's interesting because even from his newborn photos onward, we have a cocoa bear that we use to symbolize Colette in family photos. In every family photo that they've been in together, he reaches out and holds the bear's hand. And so, there are things that even we're seeing, and this was, I think he was maybe 2 weeks old when we did like the newborn photos at our home, and he did that, and he's consistently done that throughout. And it's not, we've had other animals around, he doesn't do it. Somehow like there's something that he knows about that. And so I think that that's really true and that bond really exists. You talked a little bit about, children's needs in grief. What kind of things would you say children need?
Well, first, I just want to touch on what you just brought up, because I think this is such a fascinating aspect of specifically perinatal loss is, when I was speaking before, it's bringing children in and having them be a part of the death. But like your son, Elliot, he wasn't here, right? This is his big sister.
Right.
And what is so fascinating to me is the children who are born after the loss really create their own bond with their sibling, and they grieve for this sibling that they never had the opportunity to meet, but they grieve for them. And how you're allowing him to do that is so important and so valid for his relationship with Colette. So
Right.
I commend you on allowing him that space to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it's really a fascinating area to see. And as we have friends who are also lost parents, who had children after their losses, and who are older, and we now see that they regularly talk about their siblings in the same way they would a living sibling,
Right.
and that kind of thing. So I think and I just think of, and I don't even remember who told me the story, but sort of like just at school playing around, and they said, oh yeah, well, my sister is in heaven and yours isn't. And just kind of that sort of where it's so normal to
Right.
kids and so open. And I do think like we protect kids from death. We don't really talk about what death is and everything. So I guess, first, I imagine some of the families you're working with, these might be kids who have never been really exposed to a death.
Right.
And what do you suggest about how to talk to kids about death? How to bring that up?
Right. So it all depends on their developmental and cognitive stage, right? Like, so everything surrounding talking to kids about death revolves around language. And we know that yours and my language is different than a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old. And when we can talk to them at their level, it's very important. Most of the families that I'm helping, right, you imagine families creating babies and creating their own family. So a lot of the siblings that I work with are between that age 2 to age 5 or 6. So they're younger families. And it's really important with those young children to not use the platitudes and euphemisms that a lot of adults use, right? So their brains, they have that magical thinking, right? So they can envision all of these things happening that aren't reality because they have that ability to have that magical thinking. So when you say to a young child, maybe their baby has died, their sibling, and they say, the baby's sleeping. Well, where's the baby sleeping at, right?
Right.
Or the other one, we lost the baby. Can we go find him? Right. And this is how their brains work. So it's really important to not say we lost the baby was sleeping, or the baby was sick, because then those children can often worry, well, what happens when I sleep? What happens if I get lost? What happens if I get sick? Am I going to go away and never come back? So it's really important to use concrete language like dead, died, versus passed away, sick, sleeping. because they don't understand the impermanence of death.
Mm-hmm.
So I know parents often struggle, and we talk about this in our support group a lot, of using those words because those words are scary and those words carry a lot when we're using them. And to be able to say, right, like my child died or your sister died, that's really difficult. But in the long run, for those children, you are forming healthy grieving habits and healthy language. So using those words, even though they don't fully understand them at that age, using those words will help them develop along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. You were saying like using loss, and I actually thought it was kind of funny. I was thinking of friends of ours who lost, and they said they were at a function where they were reading names of babies who had died, and one of their children born afterwards said, why are they reading all these names? And it was another family member, I think it was like an aunt or an uncle or something, said, oh, this is all the names of all the babies they've lost. And they said, well, why are they reading our sisters' names? They're not lost. We know where they are. They're in heaven. And, and I just, that always sticks with me because I think, right, we use those lost terms and those kind of like, nicer terms than death, and how interesting that is for kids and how different that language works. So I think that that's a really,
brains work so differently than our brains, and we can understand what that means, but they cannot.
right.
So I always encourage parents, depending on the age level, talking, the baby died. That means his or her body doesn't work anymore. They can't walk, they can't talk, they can't grow up like you do. And mom and dad are sad, right? So you want to label how you're feeling so then they can identify with that. So they see mom crying and they know, and you say, mom is sad because I miss my baby or I miss your sister. And they can also develop that connection to this is what I'm feeling. And mom says this is sad. So maybe that's what I'm also feeling, even though they can't name those feelings quite yet.
Right.
And then adding in your belief system. So, right, like talking about the death on a cognitive level of them that they can understand. And then adding, culturally or religiously what you believe where your baby's at and whether that's heaven or someplace else, then adding that belief system in.
Mm-hmm. Right. And, you talked a little bit about the importance of using those terms so that kids aren't taking that on of, okay, now I can't sleep because maybe that means I go away forever, those kinds of things. What do you do when kids, even if you're using the best language, kids are just going to take it into themselves and say, well, what if this happens to me? What are some tips and some suggestions you might have for that?
And those are difficult discussions, right? Because that goes into a whole nother level of death, the reality of our lives and the impermanence of our lives. Giving them reassurance, but also to the point of not lying to them, right? Because your reality has changed now, right? Like you can't say to them, oh, when you get old, you die, right?
Right.
Lost parents have a completely different reality. So reassuring them that, you're healthy. This is why we go to the doctor. We get checkups. We get all of this medical care that we do to keep you healthy, and we eat right and we exercise, and mom and dad do that too. So we can all stay as healthy as possible. In a perfect world, we all want to live until we're really old and we get to live a long life, but sometimes that doesn't happen. Right.
No, and that's really, that I think is really key. The idea of being very honest with, right now we don't see any reason why you shouldn't live the long, healthy life, but also not, making promises of, things that we can't guarantee anymore, exactly. and doing that. So, yeah. And, when you're working with families and you're, one thing that I know has always been a little controversial is sort of, photographs of babies after they die. And I think, in particular, when other kids in the family are brought into those photos. And I often say, like, I remember growing up and being a teenager, and there was a family in the neighborhood that I think they had 3 kids and their 4th was a stillbirth, and they took a family photo. And I remember thinking, oh my God, why would you do that to children? Right. And
Right.
now I'm on the other side. I'm like, of course you would, and all of
Right.
that. But what kind of things do you say, do you talk to parents about, if they want to do those memories, if they want to bring their children into situations, assuming they can, given the circumstances, what kind of conversations are you having with that? And what are some of the ways to cope with those kinds of things?
So, right, like you said, there's this big taboo about taking pictures. And we saw this recently when Chrissy Teigen
Right.
was in the news about her baby that she miscarried and how they had photos and people were flabbergasted, right? And then in my world and in your world of having a child that died, this is normal, right? Like this is just like any other process we have here. But when you're not exposed to it, it seems really, really, really strange.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for bringing siblings in and having those photos with those siblings. Is these conversations are so hard to have, but they're so important to have. And explaining to families the importance of honoring that sibling bond and allowing that sibling to come in and meet their baby. Oftentimes I talk to parents, and you maybe can relate as a mom who's had a child that died. But what we create in our brains is way scarier than what the reality is.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for children, right? They'll start picturing things in their brains about what their baby looked like or what happened to their baby versus actually being exposed to it and being able to see it for themselves, I think helps them process that differently in the long run.
Right.
I'll never forget. So now in 2021, bringing siblings in is the new thing that's on the forefront. There's a lot of research going into this, and there's a lot of open discussion about it. But years ago, this wasn't even an option. And I remember the first sibling I brought in, and the mom and I had lots of discussions about it. And the mom was very open, and she's like, I know that her older child needs to be here to meet her sister, no matter what.
Right.
So she was very comfortable with it. And we talked through how we're going to do it and what it's going to look like. And I remember walking past the nurse's station with the 2-year-old, and some of the nurses were giving me these glares like, what are you doing? Right? Like, this isn't good. This is going to harm this child. And I will tell you, those 2, 3, and 4-year-olds, they accept their sibling on a level that I can't even comprehend.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
And I feel like they do better than most adults because they don't have all of the barriers that we have.
Right.
And they see this baby and they're like, oh, that's my sister. I want to hold my sister. I want to love my sister. I want to do all of the things that I was planning to do with my sister.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And they just accept it on a different level.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's so true. And, when you were talking about that and you were saying like the 2, 3, 4-year-old, I was even thinking, my sister's 4 years younger than me and she was a preemie. And, I remember when I finally got to go in and see her, and I think I don't even think I got to go in person. I think it was like through a window or something. But how good that felt just to like see my sister and to know that she was there instead of this sort of vision that you can't really see and you can't really do. Yeah. And I think that's so important. And I, just having those memories or those pictures, I think are so great to see. I think a lot about, one of the things we laugh about is, when Colette was born and I went to see her, she had my nose. And I remember thinking that. I remember, family who came to visit saying that right away, like, she's got your nose. And when Elliot was born, I went, before I said anything, my husband said, he's got Colette's nose. And I said, well, it was my nose first. And, and we sort of laughed about it. But, I think that that's so true of, being able to see those things and being able to tell those things, it is so nice to have those experiences and to see that.
Right. And now you have pictures that you can show Elliot, right? to tell his sister's story.
Right.
And when we talk about pictures with families, it's, you might not feel like you want them right now, but we can't go back on this. We can't turn back time. So I always encourage them to take them, and also with siblings, so they have a narrative that they can tell their story about their brother or sister.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that that's so true. So, you know, we're talking largely in situations where there is a baby, there is a physical form that we can do these things with. So usually later gestational ages and things like that. What kind of things would you say for the earlier, the miscarriages, where there may not be anything physical and concrete that you can, you know, sort of show to children or take pictures of to show to children, things like that? What would you talk about, like those conversations and that grieving process looks like?
And that's also so important, and especially now. And I'm doing an emergency room education today for doctors and nurses caring for miscarriages in the ER, because it's so challenging.
Right.
And one of the things I'm going to talk about is how finding out you're pregnant in 2021 versus 25 years ago is so different, right? We have social media. We have testing that can tell us if our baby's a boy or girl way earlier than 20 weeks. Like I mentioned before, we're having these gender reveals at 12, 13, 14 weeks. And I don't want to say that people didn't bond with their babies before, but the bonding is so different now. And it's way more public. And it gives the parents a different level of bonding versus 25, 30 years ago. So really understanding that parents have that bond. And you know, right, like you pee on the stick and you're making plans for kindergarten, and college, and weddings, and that level of attachment goes along with that level of grief, right? So if you have a mom who really is not that attached early on in her pregnancy, her grief is going to be different than somebody who's had the gender reveal and bought the clothes and made different plans already, because that level of attachment is different. But when you're having, if the siblings know about that baby from the beginning, some parents wait till they're living children and other parents, you know, right from the get-go, and they're involving them and they're at the ultrasound, you know, maybe that first ultrasound when they hear that baby's heartbeat. So when there's not something physical to see, it can be difficult for children. So maybe talking through, right, this baby was growing inside mommy, but the baby was really small and we don't know what happened, but the baby's heartbeat stopped. And when that happens, the baby can't grow inside mom to be old enough to come outside of mom's body. And then maybe thinking about some sort of rituals, and you can do these rituals whether there is a physical form or not, but maybe planting a tree in the garden for the baby, maybe making a garden stone and all getting together, maybe writing a letter or drawing a picture. We know kids don't process through words, they process through art and play. So allowing them to maybe draw a picture and burying that with the tree for their baby. And all of those things can help them process it.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think there's a lot of power in, you know, naming, you know, the child. And, you know, I think, you know, when we miscarried, which is, we call our miscarriage Sweet Pea, because that was the gestational age that the baby was at. And we don't know if it was a boy or a girl. We were still too early on. And, you know, we have a belief that it might have been twins, but we don't actually know that, and all of that. But we refer to Sweet Pea regularly, just as long, you know, right alongside Colette. And I think that that is really powerful because it's a name. It's a, you know, it gives it a little bit of, even though there's not a physical you know, photo or anything like that, it gives it a little bit of more that credence. So yeah. And
I find a lot of parents, right, like in the early stages of pregnancy, they have these little nicknames, and they kind of stick with them forever. So whether they're using that or they choose an actual name, that really helps to form another layer of bonding, especially for the siblings too.
Right. Yeah, definitely. what kinds of things going forward, right? So, you talked a little bit about some memorial things, but, going forward and, as life goes on, not just talking about the sibling and introducing the sibling and then just never mentioning them again.
Right.
I imagine that would be very traumatic for kids. But what kind of things would you talk about, are healthy or are helpful to kids as time goes on?
So I think no matter what, honesty is always the best. Kids need honest, truthful facts. And those needs might change, right? Like as their language develops, you can have more open discussions about details, right? So when you have a 2-year-old and an 8-year-old, right, that 2-year-old's now going to be 8. They might have different questions. And no matter what, being honest and open about those is really key to their healthy grieving.
Mm-hmm.
I know it can be hard for parents, especially when you have those 2 3-year-olds that they keep asking, right?
Right.
Where's my baby? Where's my sister? What happened? And you have to keep retelling the story.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just their way of processing and getting it into their brain.
Mm-hmm.
But then as they grow up and they have more tools for their language, they're going to ask more questions. And being open about that is important.
Right.
Also, like you had described about your cocoa bear, having physical reminders that they can also bond with is very helpful.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to talk to parents about having a conversation. So it's not like I'm having a conversation, but it's just part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like this is what you've done with Colette, right? Like
Right.
she's part of the everyday conversation versus, oh, we have to have a conversation about your sister that died.
Right.
Versus just being a part of, like, what are we going to have for dinner? Right? We talk about Colette in everyday moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Right. I mean, we talk about her as if she was here, and obviously the conversations are different because she's not here. So it's not,
Right.
that kind of thing. But yeah, we definitely do. And, we have her birthday, we bring balloons to her grave and, we tie on balloons and, all of those kinds of things that we do to really still include her as part of our family,
Right.
even though she's not physically here.
Right. And that's how you parent her, right?
Right.
Like you
Right.
parent her every day. It just looks different than how you're parenting Elliot.
Right.
Right. And then you include them together so they also have their bond.
Right. Exactly.
The other thing I wanted to mention about across the lifespan is children do what we call regrieving. And this looks very different because at 2 years old and at 4 years old and at 16 years old, their grief is going to look different. Mm-hmm. Because 1, they're developing the language. 2, they're developing the cognitive ability to process their grief. And 3, they're going through different developmental stages where their sibling would be very important to them, right? So at 5 and 6, right? Like I don't have that sibling to kick the soccer ball around or play baseball with, or go to the pool or to fight with. And then at 16, right? I don't have my sister to confide in. I wish I had my sister here. And at 27, I don't have my sibling here to be at my wedding, right? So they continually regrieve through all of those developmental stages.
Yeah. And I think that's so important because I think, that was something that, just personally as parents, my husband and I each had a cousin who was pregnant at the same time as we were. And so we thought it would be great and we'd have, these things. And so, when she died, I just remember thinking, we just have to get through those 2 births. We just have to get through those 2 births. And when the first one happened and we found out about it, all of a sudden it realized like there's going to be triggers over and over again with these 2 kids, because as they go through their milestones, there's going to be that constant memory of like Colette should be here and going through those same milestones. And so I think that's, very true, where there is that regrieving for adults as well. And I think for children, we add in the developmental stages as well. And it's even even worse of a retriggering and a regrieving of the
Definitely.
situation.
And I think not everybody realizes that because their grief looks so different,
Right.
they don't have the language to express themselves.
Right.
So how are we going to help them express themselves, right?
Mhm.
A lot of times you'll see it in play, right? They're playing with dolls or they're playing with cars, and they'll do a death scene. And right, some people are scared by this, but this is just their way of processing. Or they're going to use art and they're going to color and draw, and they'll make a family, right? Like Elliot might make a picture of his family one day, and you're going to have Sweet Pea and Colette in that picture because you have included them and given him that opportunity to do so. And that's how he's going to process. It's really through art and play versus like we do through talk.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I think, we've talked about all the positive of like including children, including siblings and all of this and really processing it through that. What are sort of, what happens to, and I've heard various stories of this, of, adults who, it was never really talked about. Maybe it happened, maybe they knew what happened, maybe they didn't, depending on age and circumstance. And then as adults, it may come up or, just sort of be triggered. What are sort of what does that look like? And what is the negative of not doing kind of what you've been talking about?
Yeah, I've spoken to people who, years ago, this wasn't talked about, right?
Right.
This was not an open discussion. This was not an accessible discussion. And it changed people's lives, right? Like parents were dealing with this alone. They really could not reach out for support. And in turn, right, like that. So parents, we don't talk about this. So why would we talk about this with our children? So it's no fault of the parents. They were doing really what they were taught to do. But I've spoken to siblings who have said, my whole life, I really felt like something was missing, something was off. And then as an adult, I found out I had this sibling that I never knew about. And it really changed their worldview, right? And they had to process through some of that grief at an adult age because of what they weren't told, right? And sometimes the parents still are in that mindset of we don't talk about this, so they can't really process it with their parents. It's really figuring out who they can process it with. A lot of times a therapist can help sit down and process through their grief. And it might resurface when these adult children are having their own children, because then they realize like, oh my gosh, this is what I missed. So it can be difficult when the truth isn't told.
Yeah.
And there can be some resentment towards the parents, even though you and I know that they were doing the best that they could. They still have some resentment about not being told the truth.
Yeah. No, that definitely makes sense. And yeah, and I feel like I hear stories about this all the time of, adults who, maybe their parents died and then that's when they found out. So then not even having the ability to hear any stories that parents might be willing to share, and not having that. And I think that that's so important to just talk about it and to, include it. And I think, in not such a scary way, right? I think, we don't do very well handling death as a society, and we really don't about child loss. We are even worse about it. And I think that that's just so important to do it. Are there negative things to, sharing this and being very open about this? I mean, I think you touched on one that I know a lot of parents fear is like, right, are they going to have an unhealthy obsession with death or, that kind of thing. But are there negative things? Are there, things to worry about with this?
I mean, it's a tough question because in the literature, there obviously will be negative things in processing grief. I don't know that that comes from honesty and truthfulness. I think that comes along with grief and how children and adults process. So are there avenues where grief becomes a little bit more intrusive than what we expect? Yes. But I don't believe that comes from being honest about things and being truthful with kids. I do think there's probably more negative that can come along with not being honest. And right, we're talking about perinatal loss here, but this spans anywhere, especially where there's a stigma, where perinatal loss, child loss. We talk about death by suicide, right? There's a lot of stigma surrounding all of those. And when there's not truth along with it, I think there can be more complications. But I do think there can be complications when you're grieving in general.
Right.
I don't like labels of traumatic or maladaptive or prolonged or complicated, because grief is grief and everybody's grief looks different,
Right.
whether that's yours, mine, a child's grief. I think those labels can bring a negative connotation to grief, and grief is a normal process. But the medical world tries to medicalize it a little bit.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I could go on a little soapbox about that, but I'll keep that down a little bit.
I understand and I appreciate that. No, I think that's great. And I think your point about, grief is different for everyone. And I think grief is different for an individual. It changes, right? I think that I had never really understood. I had always heard this, like, grief is not linear. And I never really understood that until Colette died. And then I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. It's sort of like up and down, and there are times and that it spikes, and there are times where I'm okay, and and so I think living with that and doing that, and that is so important, and so yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention is kids grieve in spurts. So, and this is why adults are so confused by children's grief, is mom can be talking to their child and their child could be crying, I miss my sibling, or I miss my mom, or I miss my grandpa, whoever has died. And they could be actively emoting and looking like you and I grieve. And literally like this. Be like, where's my Spider-Man truck?
Right.
And the adult is like, whoa, what just happened here? And the child is just moving along. And this is how we see children's grief. They're like spurts and moments of grieving, and then they switch to another task. And this is because their brains can only hold on and process a certain amount at a time. Right. So we call them grief spurts, and we see them and they're normal. And it's normal for them to switch to another task and compartmentalize that grief. Sometimes I wish as adults we had that ability.
Right, exactly. I was thinking that too. I was like, that would be nice to.
That'd be nice if you could just be like, okay, I'm going to put my Colette grief over here right now.
Right, I'm going to move on and
on this other task.
Right, yeah, yeah.
But that's just how their brains work.
Right. And I think that seems, again, like what we're saying is like, this is a very natural feeling. And I think, everyone who's been around kids know that kids are moving from, thing to thing, right? They're in this toy and then all of a sudden they're in another one, and, all of that. And I think it's just part of their normal day, right? It's as normal as the Spider-Man toy. And, I think it's as adults that we put those like, ooh, is this healthy? Is this not, labels on.
And I think that's why a lot of times parents are like, oh no, he's not grieving, he's fine.
Right.
Because they're doing all those activities, but that doesn't mean that they're not feeling that grief.
Right. Yeah. And I guess is it safe to just say that all children who have some sort of loss like that are grieving?
Yes.
Is that safe to say? Because I know, it's like, how can you tell your child is doing X? But, it sounds like, yeah, they're grieving. It just might look very different from what we would traditionally expect.
Right, those young children, they're going to have regressive behaviors. They might start wetting the bed. They might start having separation anxiety. And the research out there, even as young as infants, feel that loss of connection, especially, if it was a parent who died, that child knows that caregiver is not there, and they feel that loss of connection. And they might distribute that separation anxiety even at a greater level because they have zero language ability.
Right.
And as they get older, they'll be able to verbalize it, but a lot of times it's shown in other behaviors. So if there is a connection and a bond, that child can grieve.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's I liked your quote at the beginning of, if you're old enough to love, like you're old enough to grieve. And I think that's so very true, that happens. And yeah, for sure.
Sorry, can I
Oh,
touch on one more thing?
absolutely. Yes, please do.
So that younger, I mean, all children, when there is a death in the family, whether that be a sibling, a parent, a grandparent, especially the younger ages, the things that are most helpful, we talked about honesty, facts, consistency, right? So the routine that they're used to, the more you as a parent can create that routine and maintain that routine for them, the better off they are. So if that means, right, like we have breakfast, lunch, and dinner together, we try and maintain that routine. We try and maintain a bedtime. We try and maintain school activities when possible. Obviously, there's time to not be in school, but keeping and maintaining consistency for them is the most healthy thing that you can do as a parent for your grieving child.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's very true. So, yeah, and kids just thrive on routine naturally. And so I think adding that in as for
Right.
grieving is even more important. So, you know, I'm just sort of wondering, I think it's very easy for sort of the outside world, right? Outside of the family to kind of do its own job of erasing the child that's not there, right? And so, you know, before Elliot was born, I was told like, oh, when you have children, you'll understand, or things like that. And I was like, I do.
Oh,
And
I do.
like, it looks different than your parenting perhaps, but I do. You know, and things like that. And I you know, I just think of when we were growing up, I think of like, you know, the oldest child in school got the notes and everything to bring home, right? That's how they did it. And so I think like, you know, Elliot will be considered an oldest or an only. We don't know what we're doing next, but what, you know, kind of approaches do you have to that, to either explaining to kids, you know, people are going to say these things, or to explaining to kind of the outside world? What kind of ideas and thoughts would you have on that?
Again, I'm going to revert back to open and honest. And I think bereaved parents are so good at keeping their child alive through speaking about them and through going to the cemetery and having birthday celebrations and keeping them a part of the conversation. But then you encounter people and you know, sometimes your family and your close friends do not understand, they do not participate, and they don't want to understand. And that can be hard emotionally on you and emotionally on your living children, right? So I think having conversations with them as they grow older, right? Not everybody sees your sister like this, but it's okay that we do. And this is how we honor her, and this is how we continue our bond with her. And also, as your child goes to school, having those discussions with their teachers, right? Because how many times is there a family project in school? What does your family look like? And a lot of times these siblings will draw their siblings in heaven. So having the teacher have that background and understanding, so the teacher then can support your child through their grief.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that all sounds like a great, you know, tips and tricks. And so, you know, as we're kind of like winding down on our time here, what would you say? I mean, anything else that you feel like you would talk about with parents that we haven't hit on? I feel like we've hit on a lot, but I know there's so much.
On a lot. And we've been talking a lot about younger children, but I didn't get the chance to talk about the school age child. I'm going to say 7+. Right. They have a way greater understanding of death and loss and grief. And maybe they've had an exposure before. But it's important as that child gets older to give them options and give them choices and give them control. For example, we had a family in our NICU, and one of the siblings was 13. No, one of the siblings was 14 and one was 12. Right. And we talked about their baby brother was going to die. And we had lots of discussions with them of what that looks like and what that means. And how do you want to honor your relationship with them, and really giving them options, kind of like we give parents options, right? These are your options. What do you want to do? those older children need options. And one of the siblings, we gave the option for both of them to come and hold their baby brother and be with them. One sibling chose to, and the other sibling did not. And right, I would encourage and want all siblings to come and have that opportunity, but you also have to respect where they are, especially when they're 10, 12, 14, 16 years old, of what they want for themselves.
Right. Yeah, no, and that's so important. You know, I even for parents too, right? I have always been a proponent of, you know, parents seeing the baby and having the chance to take pictures and having the chance to do whatever, you know, they need to help with their grieving process. And then I have met lost parents who say, I didn't want to see the baby, you know, I just didn't. And you know, I remember
that too.
Right. And I remember the first time hearing it and thinking, why would, and then I'm thinking, well, that's your choice. Like, and I get that. And, you know, and I think they don't regret that decision. And that was what they made at that point. And I think that's so important. And to give that same grace to kids who are old enough to be making those decisions.
Absolutely.
And, you know, and seeing that and seeing how that plays out.
It's so important to give them that choice.
Right.
And, you know, their decision might be different from what you want and what you hope, but you also have to honor that after explaining, right? We want to explain the facts and we want to explain the process. We want to explain that this is your chance.
Right.
But if that child still chooses after being offered, then we have to respect that child's decision.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's it's an excellent point to make, because I think that that's something where, you know, you might hear these great things and you might think, well, all the kids should do this. And there might be some kids who may feel like that's not the way they want to remember whatever that, you know, situation may be, whether it's a sibling or, you know, a parent or a grandparent or anything like that, you know, is really important. So yeah, for sure. Well, Jill, I just want to say thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy day. I know you are always in demand and always busy. And so I really appreciate you taking your time to talk to us and to share some stuff. I think, you know, this is really eye-opening and something that I am with you. I agree. Like, we don't address enough. And, you know, I think it's really important to be having these conversations. So
definitely. And thank you so much for having me. And like I said in the beginning, next to perinatal loss, like siblings and grief is my biggest passion. And you know, we can't have enough advocates for our tiniest of grievers.
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Jill. And I know we will look forward to, I know we will probably do many more work together, because it's always fun to talk to you and it's always fun to hear your perspective on everything. So thank you so much for listening. To find out more about the Colette Louise Tisdall Foundation, please visit www.colettelouise.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.